this episode of the Power Up podcast, and today we are very excited to be joined by Paul Fernandez, who is the founder of a digital performance marketing agency called The Growth Guys, and someone we have been working with over the past few months. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And today we're going to be talking all things managing your digital reputation, so managing how you show up online. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to talk about, Paul, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do with your clients?
Yeah, well, I thought you did a pretty good job there, Lisa, actually, to be fair. But yeah, we're a digital performance agency, and the majority of what we do with our clients is help them grow revenue, users and assets online. So if I'm depicting, dismantling those a little bit. So with revenue, we're looking at how people can reduce their cost of acquisition, how can they acquire clients for less money, basically. We're looking at the routes to market in which they can acquire customers and retain customers as well. Users very much sort of aimed at tech platforms mainly, but in terms of businesses generally, how can you acquire that user in the beginning, not necessarily as a customer, but mainly as an advocate of the brand? They've taken an interest in what you're doing, and then assets, all things digital assets, your social media profiles, your website, your intellectual property. How are you managing and optimizing that online? We don't obviously do anything offline, but it can always come together. The online and offline, very much a sort of sentient thing now. So it's, yeah, that's pretty much what we do.
Welcome from me as well, Paul. Delighted to have you here. This is a subject I think for many people listening to this will be very interested in, that it is compared perhaps to other things that we've known throughout our life. There's more probably unknowns than knowns. Mm-hmm. And given the fact that it's an ever-changing dynamic, it leaves people quite confused, quite frustrated, not knowing where to go. I certainly know I've fallen foul to engaging with several agencies and not really necessarily getting the result we were looking for. And obviously we've been working with you, and the early signs are certainly all very positive, hence having you on the show today. Could you just explain what you mean, just very briefly before we get into the agenda, what do you mean by performance marketing, just briefly?
Yeah, so performance marketing is what we like to say is a bit like a jigsaw. We're basically putting together little pieces of the customer journey and asking for commitment from the audience. So performance marketing is very, very much centered around paid advertising. So we're looking at the, things like Google ads, Facebook ads. We're trying to get someone to take action, and we're being measured on that performance, whether it's through metrics like cost per click or it's cost per conversion. How much does it cost to acquire a customer? They're very much the performance metrics that we're looking at when we're advertising online, hence why we're performance marketing. And it's usually centered around paid.
Okay, excellent.
And as Martin said, we've been working with Paul for the last couple of months, and I, for one, have learned a lot. It felt like a dark art. Is this like a slightly less dark art now?
And I hope so.
Yeah. So I know this episode is going to be packed full of practical advice. So we're going to explore changes in the digital landscape, particularly post-pandemic, why it's important to manage and take charge of your digital reputation, and some of the tools and technology to prioritize in doing that, because there's so many different things. How do you navigate which ones are going to be most beneficial? We're also going to touch on some of the fears associated with showing up online and why maybe some people don't pay attention to this. It might be to do with discomfort in actually doing so, and then provide some really practical tips. Well, Paul's going to provide some really practical tips to help you manage your digital reputation.
I also think it's important to point out, if you're listening to this and thinking, is this for me? I would suggest, whether you are running a small business, whether you are a single operator as a business, whether or not you are an established executive many of our clients are established executives. It really doesn't matter. The taking control of your digital landscape, I think, is increasingly important. I know personally as a speaker that it's not uncommon if your name appears on some sort of agenda, that's the first place people go to check you out. And if what they see isn't laid out very clearly, you're off to a bad start.
Yeah.
So I really think stay tuned, stay listening, because this is applicable to everybody. The challenge is not everybody realizes it is applicable to them. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Paul.
Yeah, I think regardless of what kind of walk of life you come, really, you have a reputation, it's yours to own. But the way the world is moving and has moved and is going to keep moving in more of a digital space, that's where you own it. The old adage, is what people say about you when you're not in the room, and online you're never in the room.
Right.
So you've got to really make the most of it, and it's there 24/7 worldwide.
And I guess if you have ever been online and contributed on social platforms, and there is a digital reputation out there anyway, whether you like it or not, so it's better to take charge of that and curate that yourself rather than, what's the quote?
You're never in the room.
But you are who Google say you are.
That's right. Yeah. And I totally stole that from Daniel Priestley, but it's a really nice quote, actually, because it's so true in terms of, if you think about how people behave, Googling is a verb, it's a doing word now, where people actually Google you. It's an art of doing, an art of researching you. And if you're coming up with bad reviews, and when I talk about this, I use the example of Ollie Robinson, the English cricketer. He very early on, he was having some great success with the England cricket team, and then all of a sudden some stuff just came out of the closet. Some old quotations, I think that they might have even been slightly racist, and they were haunting him years later. So anybody who was kind of maybe looking after his, he might not have had someone looking after his PR at that time, but that was a crisis that needed to be managed, and he still has a career, I believe, but that could have really ruined him. That's just because he didn't manage his reputation properly.
And what do you think? Obviously, the passage of time, the use of the internet and that sort of thing has evolved and become more at the forefront of things. But do you think, post-pandemic, did that accelerate things? Because it seems like there's small businesses popping up online, influencers, and the whole thing seems to me to have blown up since the pandemic. Is that true?
Yeah, 100%. We went through a shift. We were going through a shift. And I think what was going to happen, essentially, what happened in 2020 was maybe due to happen in 2025.
Okay.
Eventually that was ramped up, and it was brought forward by 5 years. And I think just about that sort of time, actually, and I talk about it, with peers and with clients as well. But there was a time where around the end of March to the end of April, where people really did not know what the hell was about to happen. They couldn't see around the corner in terms of how the government was going to handle the pandemic, how the world was going to react, how commerce generally was going to react, how people would do business. And there was a sort of 4-week period where people were really sitting on their hands a little bit, going, I don't know what to do for the best. And it took some larger movers to really sort of set it off, really, and everyone moved online. We realized business isn't going to break. We can work from home. Everyone is online. Next day delivery is, same day delivery is a thing. Supermarkets can operate. The whole world wasn't going to just crash completely. It did for a little time, but it soon picked back up. And as individuals, we realized that we are constantly online. We're online for everything that we do. And I use the dishwasher analogy quite a lot as well in terms of buying behavior. People go online first for everything, whether it's researching tourist destinations, whether it's trying to get inspiration for their tea. What are we going to cook this evening? It's there. It's a part of our lives. It's like our third limb, third arm, that we need to think about. Anything that's worth anything newsworthy or anything that you want to read, it's online. Whether you believe it or not, it's a different matter. But that's everything is online nowadays, and that's just the way it is. And small business owners specifically, they realized that pretty quickly. Hence why there was just this massive influx of people wanting to to engage digital experts, digital technicians to be able to bring their business more online. It wasn't so much of an issue for established businesses, I don't think, because they could ride the wave.
Yeah.
But with smaller businesses, maybe turning over less than $1 million, for them, certainly they needed to figure out pretty quickly how they were going to transact. How could people transact with them online? And I'm not talking about hotels and hospitality in this conversation. I'm talking more around online commerce.
Yeah, and we certainly got experience of that, Martin, haven't we? Because that is, that was where Power Up was, born from, was the sessions that we did with the need to go online in the pandemic.
Oh, I mean, it was a like a lot of people, well, particularly with ours, 95% of our income was face to face, and then suddenly that was zero, and 50% of it was in foreign currency. So we suddenly had to do something about it. We had to think about it, and I wasn't just thinking about the marketing, but you suddenly became very self-conscious of what was actually, if people searched your name, then what would come up. And so it's been a discipline ever since.
And I think sort of professionally as well, because there were more people online and using online for absolutely everything, meant that as there were obviously people going on furlough, maybe people losing jobs, looking for other opportunities, it makes sense that also happened online. Always has done, with things like LinkedIn and the rise of those sorts of things. But I definitely feel like since the pandemic, it just seems to have become much more into focus.
Yeah, and that's a good use case. That's a good use case that you're talking about there, actually, with, certainly with getting jobs. I mean, I realized probably around 2015, maybe around that time, 2015, 2016, that LinkedIn was a player. LinkedIn was where people were going to transact professionally. It was basically your online CV, and that's kind of how it is. I mean, it's transformed a little bit since then, but having the foresight to understand how digital plays a part in your professional development and your personal development is a huge factor. I think it's just a case of you've got to handle. I think what's interesting as well, actually, is that, if you think about sort of older ways of doing business, more traditional ways of doing business, people would teach you how to, how to mirror and how to NLP style, techniques. You don't have that ability to be able to perform those techniques online. You're basically creating yourself a library of content that people can consume prior to meeting you. So you have all of those touch points. You can have all of those miniature micro moments of meeting someone online, feel like you know them, and it's I find that incredible. But when you meet that person, you want it to be an extension of what you've just seen online.
Yeah, you
don't want to find that someone is really charismatic online, can talk the talk online, and when you meet them, they've got the charisma of a gnat. Like you don't want that.
I definitely had a few experiences of that back in the old online dating days. So you definitely don't want that in the professional landscape.
I mean, also,
it's not mutually exclusive, though.
But also the opposite way around. Will you even meet the person because their online persona? You check them out. You maybe have you've done a couple of searches to find out a little bit about them, and immediately you're put off by either lack of visibility, quality of visibility. We could get quite critical about where we position them. You could be an incredibly capable individual. And this is where I was saying the top of this conversation. For some who are not digital natives, they're not brought up using these tools. They're less familiar with them. They don't really think they need to. Something they feel they really need to pay attention to until such time they maybe start going for these larger positions in larger corporates, and then suddenly it becomes important. But one of the models we talk about, Paul, is that when you're being assessed or judged potentially by somebody, a prospective employer, there's going to be an element of, can you do the job, your performance, ticking the box, credentials, yes, image, as we say, what image do you have, what reputation do you have? You have a great reputation. But the third one, which is attributed often to 60% of the impact, is actually exposure, which is exactly what we're talking about here. is who knows you and what do they know you for, and how well is that presented?
Yeah.
So I think we've really outlined the case for this. Let's crack on and think about how we can help people actually do it.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Martin, it maybe historically felt like it was important for those at more senior levels, or those in industries like ours where you have some sort of deliveries presence in some way. But actually, with the job market and the increasing levels of competition and, the war on talent and all of that sort of thing, everybody needs to use it and manage it and differentiate it, don't they?
I would say everybody needs some kind of digital reputation. I think, Martin, your point around the lack of visibility can sometimes be a red flag, and I think that's absolutely right, because people want to know a little bit about who they're meeting or who they're going to be going into a meeting with or doing business with before that happens. And they want to be able to research. People want to deep dive on you and find out what you believe in. And that's a fair point, which I think kind of segues us quite nicely into how people can do that. You mentioned around the talent, can this person do the job? For me personally, as an employer, what I'm actually looking at, does this person have an opinion?
Yeah.
Do they just have an opinion? Because someone who just kind of floats through life and goes, oh, they're a yes man or, a yes woman as well. But it's just a case of, do they have an opinion? Can they talk about something that they're passionate about? What do they believe in? What are their values? I want to know, like, oh, you're really into football. That's great. I can see that you really love that and you've got an opinion about it and you can write about it. You can get on video and talk about it. And that's more important to me personally than can they do the job. Doing the job, I know they'll be able to do the job because we'll train them to do the job. It's whether or not they've got the attitude and the value and an opinion. Are they outspoken? We don't want people to just kind of come in, blend in and get forgotten about. We want people to have an opinion, and you can do that online ahead of time. So utilize platforms like LinkedIn. It's completely free. I've got a video coming out in a couple of weeks actually of three methods that people can use to do B2B marketing for free. And it's just a case, you can utilize LinkedIn hugely. It's there, it's free. Utilize X, formerly known as Twitter. I've always got to say that. It can be there as a diary. Just write down your thoughts.
Yeah, and it's not just about having to necessarily do the videos or it's however you show up, isn't it? Is it to do also with how you comment on other people's things, your point of view that you share as you're commenting on posts in LinkedIn, what you put out on Instagram and Facebook and any other platforms. It's not just about doing which might be in some people's minds you have to go on YouTube and start doing videos. It's wherever you show up, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the objective, and I can only speak personally, but I know amongst peers and clients and past clients as well, you want to, as a business, if your objective is to do business online, then you show up in the places where your audience is at.
Yeah.
So for me, mine's very much on YouTube and LinkedIn. I know that. But if you're, for instance, in the job hunt, you might have more of a presence on LinkedIn than YouTube.
Yeah.
If you want to be an influencer, for instance, that you might be on YouTube and Instagram, or you might be on TikTok. It just depends on what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah.
I think posting videos about yourself, crying into camera, talking about how you lost your dog, for instance, that's a really extreme example, but if you're doing that and there's no real sort of through line as to why you're doing that, other than maybe you just needed to vent or you needed an outcry, an outlet to express your emotion, that's fair enough. But just know that someone's going to look at that and go, I wonder what that was for.
What
does that say about the person? It's weird.
And also, I think we asked the question, would I have done that?
Yeah, exactly.
What would that be the right place to do it, the right forum? Let's think about that then. I mean, what is some guidance on how people should utilize it? Because I do think for the non-digital native, non-digital thinker, actually quite daunting. I know senior people who wouldn't have a clue. And it's not, the super bright, sharp people just don't know about this. And they find it quite daunting and quite frightening. And there are some people it's just part of their daily life, and they just, and it's they're very comfortable with it. If we're talking about managing their online reputation, what are some of the things that people should be paying attention to?
So first thing, I think if you don't have a digital reputation, you're in it can be a great place to start. You're starting with a blank canvas. So, essentially you could be whoever you want it to be, as long as you can maintain that. And that's what you want to do. For people who already, I would suggest by having a bit of a social cleanse, have a bit of a cleanse first, go through old profiles, start new profiles if that old profile doesn't represent you like it should do. I mean, my Facebook profile, for instance, I clearly put on there that it's not for business. I don't use it for business. I'm very choosy about who I accept as friends on there. And that's not because I've got anything to hide. It's just I'm not really on there. And I use it purely to connect. If you're just getting started, other than actually having to teach you how to use a phone or how to use these things, it's actually relatively simple. I would start by finding 10 people who I look out for. Who do I do business with in person? Find their profiles and start engaging with them, comment on stuff they're talking about, and use it as a conversation. It's there to interact with. It's a two-way thing. It's not just about putting stuff out there and leaving it. They call it post and ghost. Don't post and ghost, essentially. Be interactive. I'd say make sure you have an opinion. Have an opinion about something. Choose a side, because no one likes like I said, a yes man. Have an opinion about something. Don't just go, yeah, I agree with all of that. Fantastic. That's bland. And I'm not saying have an opinion for the sake of it, but find the things that you have an opinion on and get part of the conversation. And you will still show up. You're still showing up by having an opinion, by commenting on someone else's content. And slowly you can begin to build up the confidence to then put something out for yourself. I mean, this is very early days. Like this is if you are literally starting from scratch. But there are people who've been on social media for years and years and years, and probably have something from 10 years ago that they don't think represents them. And it's up to you how you manage that. You can either go back and delete it, or you can go and maybe even highlight it and go, wow, I can't believe I used to think like this 10 years ago, how things have changed. I now believe this. And people are pretty forgiving, as long as it's really not, embarrassing content. But
Is it important to do a bit of an audit in terms of thinking about how you want to show up in doing that digital cleanse? You can see the things you think, oh, I definitely want to hide those photos or delete those photos, but what are some of the things going forward? How do I want to be shown? And also, how do people do that with sort of thinking about that consciously, but still then showing up ethically and authentically?
That's a good word to use, actually, ethically, because everyone knows you've had a past life. Everyone knows that you probably went to uni and spent far too much money on drink and had a great time, right? But if you were a member of the BNP and spouting racist nonsense, and that's not you anymore, I'd probably go and delete that stuff. You're part of some kind of like far right group, and that's not you anymore.
And can you actually delete stuff, or is it always somewhere?
I mean, you can do your best to mitigate it, but like if it's written somewhere else on a publication, you've got to then contact that publication and get them to delete it. But that's a very hard job. I think it's a case of you've got to think about what you're putting online and knowing that it's probably going to be there forever. Some iteration of that is going to be there forever. And you're going to have to come up with a reasonable explanation as to why that's there in the future if it gets brought up. I get quite disenfranchised, actually, when I see younger people online and they're maybe doing like half naked dances on TikTok and things. I'm like, you are literally going to look at that in 10 years' time and wonder why you didn't get that job. And I know that sounds dramatic, but you've really got to think about how you're putting yourself out there, because people are going to look back on all that stuff. Okay, they might be forgiving and go, that was 10 years ago. They're not that person now.
But they might not.
Yeah. And you can't say that they're being discriminatory. They're not. They're just going on what you've put out there.
Yeah. And I mean, Martin and I are of pre-internet times.
Hey, I still remember before the internet. Don't count me out.
Between, before our mid 20s or something like that. But, you know, for people growing up now, it's always been there. So they've grown, you know. So how do you educate? I mean, they do teach it in schools a little bit, but you know, that education needs to start a lot earlier than when you get to work and go for your first job.
Absolutely, it does. The generations is an interesting thing. So I technically put myself as a millennial. That's what that's why I am. I say technically, I am a millennial. My parents, they're Gen X.
Yeah.
My kids, Gen Alpha, but the kids in between, Gen Z. Everyone is different. Gen Z are pretty much internet first. They're digital first. They've known nothing else.
Yeah.
Millennials, they've seen the blend. Gen X, they've seen the blend as well, but they've had to adopt it. Whereas I think millennials, it was kind of coming at us. The internet and social media was coming at us in our formative years.
Yeah.
So it's millennials are in this really quite unique situation where we were able to adapt to that pretty quickly and be okay with it and know how to use it. Whereas Gen Alpha and Gen Z, it's all they've ever known. There's no adoption or no adaptation needed. Gen X, probably put my mum and dad in there as well, that I've had to teach them how to use it. And I comment quite prolifically on best practices. Probably wouldn't say that, that kind of thing. But the generations is an interesting one. But I think trying to teach people how to be on social media, it's you can advise best practices. I think you can advise, but you can't teach them. They're going to use it how they're going to use it.
Yeah.
It's an extension. It's literally at the end of their fingertips. And it depends on things like impulsivity. Do you react emotionally to things? If you do, just don't react emotionally on social media because you might regret it. You've got to be very, very quick to delete something. I mean, we're talking about things you might regret here. Actually, there's massive forces for good for having an online reputation. It can bring around incredible opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's there for, if your online reputation is pitching something that you want to make happen, it can happen, and it can happen pretty quickly. So I was doing a talk the other day, and I was doing an exercise and asked everybody in the room to put up their hand how much they would they pay £1? And we were talking about paid advertising, but it's kind of related to just general social media. Would you pay £1 to speak on stage for 30 seconds in front of 15,000 people? Some people would do that. Some people didn't because they just had fear of speaking. And it went all the way up, and I said, right, who would pay 10 grand? And what I was trying to highlight was the cost of advertising online. What actually came out of the conversation is that you have the ability to talk to thousands and thousands and thousands of people in a moment's notice. And that's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's why having an online reputation matters.
And
because you are literally talking to thousands of people.
Yeah. And so you mentioned in that, some people wouldn't want to do it because of the fears associated with it. What are some of the fears that people have showing up online? What stops people doing it?
Confidence is a big thing. I think fear of rejection. People naturally want people to agree with them. I think some people maybe aren't very good with confrontation. The ability to stand behind your beliefs and be able to, I think with a lot of things, and I point this towards people who do quite a lot of trolling of people, specifically like celebrities, trolling of celebrities. They're quite happy to hide behind a keyboard and write those nasty things, but they would be pushed to back them up. And I think this is where people can stand out, is if you can have an opinion on something and do it in a nice and sort of almost a debate style way, and then back up and stand by your beliefs. That's quite powerful.
Yeah.
What you're saying might be completely wrong to the other person, but if you can back it up and you can stand behind it and you're confident in your beliefs, then that's valuable.
And I guess
not everyone's going to agree, and you're not going to please everybody.
And being respectful and kind in how you share that view. Yeah, I see some
absolutely
horrendous things.
Oh, we all do. We all do. It's just
treat them. I think treat them as if they were in front of you is a good thing. I mean, particularly if you are a professional, act in a professional way, conduct yourself in a way. Don't think because it's the internet, it doesn't count, and you can hide behind it, as you say, behind a computer screen or your keyboard. It doesn't matter, because an attitude will prevail.
Yeah.
And attitude is going to make a difference to some later point. I just want to give a quick example of we're talking about using this in a purposeful way, intentionally, and thinking longer term. There's a good friend of ours that Lisa knows, Colin Hiles. He was describing how his son Sonny wanted to go for a role at Apple. He did a degree in computer engineering, and that was his end goal. So he thought about the types of things that they were recruiting for, and then started quite a long way back, started working on his own projects in those areas and publishing the results, writing papers about it, writing articles, as you say, having a point of view and putting a trail of things down.
Yeah.
That would evidence at some later point when he gets that interview that, well, because the classic thing is, what makes you think you're qualified for this role? What experience do you have? How have you demonstrated your interest? You say you've got interest, but how have you demonstrated it? And you know what it's like in interviews. People come out with pull out a couple of sort of soft examples. It's all a bit flimsy and it's a bit shoehorning a few desperate things in. But here we have this young, ambitious individual who has got a clear track that he can actually signal to and evidence in a very professional way of the type of coding he's done, the types of things he's interested in, the accolades he's got for it, the projects he's done. And, whether or not this is the reason he got it, but out of 1,000 applicants, he got the role.
Yeah.
I mean, that's outstanding.
It is.
That is an outstanding example. I'd caveat that and say that's a very incredibly rare example as well.
Yeah.
That kid clearly knows where he was going and what he needed to do. And he's clearly had a lot of very good guidance and advice actually for doing that. But that's someone as well. Do you mind me asking how old he was?
Well, I mean, he would have, he did his, he got a first class honours degree, and I think this was his job straight out of. Or did he? No, actually, no. He did another thing he did. I think he might have taken a gap here, and he did work again in the area that he wanted to demonstrate that. So he did like an internship in a couple of places, and I think worked over the summer. I can't remember all the details.
He's only mid-20s now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's only like I would say he's probably around 26, 27, 28, but doing very well and very understated.
Just the discipline,
to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
just
understated.
the discipline to be able to do that. When there's so many distractions as a young person.
Yeah.
20, 25, mid-20s, you put them in the Gen Z pile, right? And there's so many distractions for that sort of demographic. I think to have that discipline, the consistency, that's remarkable. But that is probably like gold standard reputation management and knowing, you've got a goal to aim for. And I think that's a big thing.
It's also in a world of sort of with youngsters, perhaps, a little bit more instant gratification, no fault of their own, but things do come sooner and faster, and they get used to that. To have that delayed gratification, to do the hard work without reward, knowing that a lump later at some point. I'm sure his dad Colin would take all the credit for it, but but no, I think in all fairness, Colin was saying that he that's what he did, and it worked. And it is a great example. So
Fantastic.
I think
Love that.
A lot of people, I'm sure you get the same sort of thing, Paul, where people say, "Oh, I'd like to be. How to get into your work?" And I get this a lot. How do I become a facilitator? You love what you do, travel the world, you've got a great lifestyle. How do I get into it? And he says, how can I transition from being a sales leader or a marketing manager into this role? And I said, the first thing I say is you've got to be able to demonstrate that you want to do it. You like the idea of it, but do you actually really want to do it? So go do it and then tell people about it, publish it, talk about it. What have you commented on? Where would I see evidence of any kind of education online that I could check it out and check out with other people that you've actually done it? That would then give me confidence that that you're definitely worth speaking to. And bearing in mind, by the way, that the frightening thing is now that so many of these recruiters use these very clever algorithms just to turf out anybody who doesn't actually fit this criteria. Yeah. And that's done automatically by AI. So and how are they doing that? It's purely a digital thing. So, we've got to pay attention to this.
Mm.
It's
And so,
it's wild.
so we talked earlier about, and everything that you've said in the example, Martin, fantastic in terms of people that feel comfortable doing that. If somebody thinks, yes, that is absolutely what I need to do, but I am so terrified and don't know where to begin, how should people start to overcome that fear and get comfortable in an online space?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's a plethora of answers for that. My advice would be to look at people that you actually genuinely look up to, and ask yourself why you look up to them as well. We're talking content creators, professionals who are online and active. Look at what they're doing and not trying to replicate it, but try and look at the best practices. What are they doing that's really good? What are they doing? Oh, yeah, well, I think I could do that. But that doesn't solve, that's just part of the planning process, potentially.
Yeah.
That doesn't solve the fear. And the fear kind of comes from within massively. It's those fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of looking silly, all those kinds of things. I've been through all of those. I'm sure everybody on this podcast has as well. That fear of silly never goes away, but I think it's just how you frame it. Who am I fearful of looking silly from?
Yeah.
So, like, if it's Joe Bloggs down the street who you've never really spoken to much in your life,
Yeah.
and has never done much with their professional career, why would you care about the opinion? You only really care about the opinion of people who are either on or above your level, right? And I don't mean that disrespectfully,
No.
but I wouldn't take business advice from someone who's never started a business.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take content advice from someone who's never published content.
I think as well, there's a perspective, and it's a distorted perspective that if you go online, then the whole world is going to.
Yeah, not true. Not true, really.
It's absolutely not true, as we well know. It's a
Don't flatter yourself.
percentage, tiny percentage of
And also, the other thing I would say about that, the same answer really, is that when people say, "Well, I'm worried about what people think," again, don't flatter yourself, my friend.
Yeah.
They don't actually care. The fact you think they care about what you're saying that much, but honestly, you're don't flatter yourself. They don't really care.
No one gives a shit.
No,
no one gives a shit. You could walk down the street, and unless you're wearing like the most bizarre costume, people won't even notice you.
No.
But that's what you're online to do, is to get noticed.
Yes.
So don't be fearful of people noticing you if it's going to happen.
And you said it earlier, lean into it and start small, and start by commenting on other people. Grow your confidence that way, I think.
I have to say another thing, Paul, I've noticed is that people feel they need to be saying something spectacularly different to everyone else, which is incredibly hard to do. Something original, something so different is gonna be the most viral. No, forget that.
Yeah.
Just be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know what your advice on that is, but but this concern that I need to say something profound, different, amazing. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I've seen it. And I've been there a little bit myself, actually. You want to stand out, and you think the only way you're going to stand out is by saying something wildly different.
Yeah.
And this is why you actually get quite a lot of, sort of negative gurus. I might pile them as, but because they're trying to get a reaction for the sake of getting a reaction, and it's not always the best way.
Yeah.
And if you're saying something that someone else has said 1,000 times before, just how can you bring your spin to it? That's it. It's just looking for a bit of flair. I like video as a medium, so I choose to do a lot of my content through video, because I feel that's the truest representation. That I can show my mannerisms, my sort of personality flex, all those kind of things. That's the best way for me to get I'm not a great writer. I'm not a great writer, never have been, but I can talk, I can have a conversation. And I think it's just understanding what your strengths are.
Yeah.
If you're not the greatest writer and you're scared about people pulling you up on your punctuation, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And it's really easy to say, don't worry about it, because I know people will tie themselves in knots. They'll have anxiety attacks about potentially posting content. That is the reality of it. But just start small. Start with what you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with video, write. If you're not comfortable with writing, speak.
I think that's really, really good advice. And, it's just a new muscle, isn't it, to exercise, and you have to.
I would say that just express your point of view. This is the one difference with you is you're the only one, you haven't said it before. That's the uniqueness. It's you saying it. It might be similar.
I like that.
You're the only one that's, people want to know. You're targeting people that you want to get to know, and you want to get to know them. It's the whole, the imposter syndrome starts to kick in. Oh, will people really like this? Does it, and they're obsessed about how many likes they get, and are people commenting on it? And that's why I think I got past my sort of fear of being online. I started caring less. I care about what I'm saying, but I'm caring less about whether everybody agrees with me or likes it. And I know, having recorded so many videos I've put out, I'm amazed how some of them have gone crazy, and some of them I thought, well, I've got these amazing words of wisdom have amounted to actually nothing.
I remember
I'm sure everybody experiences that, for sure.
I think one of my best ones, I just was at a park and I had a camera on a tree, right? And I said, "Don't be a tree. They can't move. They can't move," or something like that, right?
That isn't actually your best one, Martin, is it?
No, we were, my best. Well, yeah. Pulling out my neighbour's bin was definitely the top one.
Awesome.
Trampling
not because you were drunk.
The contents down in to get my my rubbish in his bin, my garden refuse in his bin.
Caught on a ring doorbell.
He happened to be a blue dot celeb, so the numbers went to this viral video of me falling out of his bin.
Awesome.
To something like, I think it was about 400,000.
That raises an interesting topic, actually. A couple of things on that. That's the other thing about content as well, is you can totally, if you're looking to get more visible, you can be doing content with people who already are visible. So people who already have an online reputation, and a good one, I might add, unless you want to be attached to the ones that have got a bad reputation. But attaching yourselves to people that have got a good reputation can do wonders for you. It happened to us. We're a very real, example of that. Just on the topic earlier, what you're saying about, not looking at the comments and things. I remember a really, really famous podcast between Joe Rogan and Neil deGrasse Tyson. DeGrasse Tyson was actually saying how he looks at the comments all the time. If you get in that kind of routine of looking at the comments all the time, you are going to do yourself. You're going to be so ill.
Yes.
You're going to be mentally tortured. I'm not saying post and ghost, but look at whether your content's resonating or not. But don't go mad. You don't need to go, and I mean literally, you don't want to go mad looking at the comments, because there is a mental health aspect which we probably don't have time to touch into today, but a huge mental health crisis on the horizon with younger people and social media. Everything you see on social media is not a true reality. You're seeing everybody's highlight reel.
Of course you are.
You're not seeing the real people. You're not seeing them do the dishes. You're not seeing them put their kids to bed. You're not saying, well, unless they show that kind of stuff. But there are people, and I would probably put someone like, Joe, the fitness coach. I've forgotten his surname. Yeah, he's very transparent with his content. He shows every aspect of his life. But then you've got others that show what they want you to see. And you have that control. How much do you want people to know about your life? I very rarely put my kids online because I have opinion about it, and it's their life. I don't want to force them onto social media. So you have complete control. You have this reputation. You can do it for great things. You can have a great reputation, but you can also have a bad reputation. But you've just got to be in control of it and manage it.
I like your earlier comment. It's yours to own. I think that's a really good message.
Absolutely.
As you say, everyone's got their show reel up there. It's all shiny show reel. But I think in the business world, I've used the word. I think you come back to this word, authentic, or being authentic, being real, being honest. Express your opinions without fear. Just quickly, what about consistency?
Consistency is key. It's about putting the reps in. You've got to put the reps in. You wouldn't go to the gym once and expect to see a result. You wouldn't go to the gym.
Do that though, because that's really time consuming.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, if we're looking at platforms like LinkedIn, for instance, just for the professionals out there who, you know, want to have an online reputation for their professional network, I'd say posting a few times a week can take less than an hour to schedule in. You know, think about what you're saying. You know, does this align to what I want to say? You know, is it aligning to my client's goals? Is it aligning to my client's problems? Is this a good representation of me and what I believe in? Think about the medium. How are you putting that across? You know, it doesn't have to take ages. It can take 5 minutes on a morning. If that's the way you like to do content, then do it that way. If you want to plan in advance and take an hour on a Sunday for the rest of the week, then do it that way. But being consistent is key. Get into a rhythm that you can consist. It's like the gym, and I'll use that again, that analogy. If you are someone who wants to run a marathon by the end of the year, you're going to have to be running miles. You're going to have to run miles, and you're going to have to run miles often. If you're someone who wants to get, you know, wants to, you know, be at a bodybuilding show, you are going to have to be in the gym twice a day, every day, and you're going to have to be eating the right stuff as well. And it's just about being consistent in alignment with the goals that you want to achieve, you know, and just something that's comfortable for you, that's not going to take you down. Just a word on the authentic piece before we finish it, but being authentic, it's an argument I've been in a few times. I had a really good conversation with a guy called Steve, actually, from an agency called Jargo. We Are Jargo in Leeds. And we were talking about this idea of authenticity. People who say they're being authentic are not authentic. People who are authentic don't know that they're being authentic.
That's right. That is a very good distinction. Yeah.
And it's just, I think you can be mindful about being authentic.
Yeah.
I think people who profess they're authentic usually aren't.
Yeah. No, and I like that. It's almost like I'm going to be intentionally authentic, and by virtue of you doing that, you're not.
Exactly.
You're overthinking it. Yeah. As Lisa has remarked, Paul, has been highly practical and really, really useful. And I'm sure anyone listening to this, whatever you've heard, I would just suggest that you take heed of what you've said and just go and apply some of the simple ideas. If you could just start to think about, even if it just moves you to a point where you think, maybe I should just pay a little bit more attention to this. And as you said, I think you talked about it doing like an audit or something at the beginning. What was the phrase you used?
Social cleanse.
Social cleanse, really like that. Do a bit of a social cleanse. Start with that, and then just start to get into some regular habits every week. Do it, you know, tiny, easy actions, as our friend Colin says. Don't go crazy. Don't think, oh, I need to go crazy every single week. Just do it gradually every week until it just becomes part of your habit. And I absolutely promise you, it will make a difference in the long run. So our wish for you always is that you don't just hear these ideas and find them interesting, but you do actually go and apply them where the rubber meets the road. That's where it makes the difference. So thank you so much, Paul. And obviously we'll put your details in the show notes if you want to contact Paul and talk to him about your online digital strategy. We'd highly recommend that you do contact him if you want to have a conversation.
Thanks, guys.
Open to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Thanks, guys.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.